Welcome the anointed ones. There is something happening right now that nobody warned you about. Something that arrives quietly without fanfare. In the aftermath of your hardest season, you worked in silence. You built alone. You kept going when every rational voice in the room said it made no sense to continue. And now the results are showing. Now the gap between where you started and where you stand is impossible to ignore. And here is the part nobody tells you. The people who watched you struggle with ease are not reacting the way you expected. There is a strange and deeply human phenomenon that psychologists have studied for decades, but that almost never gets talked about openly. People are comfortable with struggle stories. They understand them. They sympathize with them. A person grinding through difficulty is safe, predictable, easy to root for from a comfortable distance. But the moment that same person wins quietly, especially without help, without applause, without permission or support from the very people who watched them bleed, something in the room shifts. The air changes. The smiles become slightly less convincing. The congratulations arrive with a strange weight behind them. Not because people hate success. That is the convenient explanation. The deeper truth is far more uncomfortable. Success becomes deeply unsettling when it arrives on someone the crowd never expected to carry it. Psychologists call this status expectation bias. Without realizing it, people form invisible rankings in their minds. They decide, early and quietly, who will rise, who will remain average, and who will struggle indefinitely. These mental rankings do not feel like opinions. They feel like facts. And once they are formed, most people stop questioning them. So when someone breaks out of the box that was built for them, when the person who was quietly filed away under a certain category walks past every invisible boundary that was placed around their life, the human mind scrambles. It does not know what to do with the data. And that scrambling creates tension, resentment, disorientation, and sometimes a very specific kind of silence that is louder than anything anyone in the room has ever said. Stay with me, because what I am about to share with you explains exactly why your victory is not just a personal milestone. It is a disruption, a reckoning. And for some people watching from the edges of your story, it is eating them alive. Here is what none of them will ever admit out loud. Human beings can watch someone struggle for 10 years and feel entirely comfortable. Comfortable enough to offer pity. Comfortable enough to carry a quiet confidence that they know how this story ends. But let that same person win in year 11. And suddenly, the same people start behaving like detectives at a crime scene. Something does not add up. The investigation begins. The answer is simple. You kept going, but the why behind their reaction runs much deeper. And that is exactly what we are going to explore today. Before we go further, if this message is already speaking to something deep inside you, if you feel something stirring in your chest, your support means everything to this work. There is a link in the description below and pinned in the comments where you can buy me a coffee. It is a small act that carries enormous spiritual weight. When you pour into something that pours into you, you open a channel of reciprocity between yourself and the universe. Every contribution, no matter how small, tells the world that you are ready to receive more of what feeds your soul. Check the description and the comments for that link whenever you feel moved. Now, let us continue. What makes your victory powerful enough to disturb the emotional balance around you is not the size of what you accomplished. It is the conditions under which you accomplished it. No crowd pushing you forward. No safety net beneath you. No chorus of familiar voices telling you it was possible. Just discipline, stubborn belief. and a mind that refused to stay inside the small, quiet box that other people had already built for you. That kind of journey does not just produce a result. It produces a revelation, and revelations make people deeply uncomfortable, especially when they reveal something the observer was not prepared to face about themselves. Number 1. Your victory destroyed the story they had already written about you. Long before the result appeared, long before your progress became visible, most people who knew you had already written a quiet story about how your life would unfold. It was never written on paper, but it existed clearly in their minds. In that story, you had limits. There was a ceiling. There was a line you were never supposed to cross. The human mind loves categories. It creates them automatically because categories make the world feel manageable and predictable. Someone gets labeled as the quiet one, the average one, the one who tries hard but never quite gets there. And once those labels are assigned, most people stop updating the story. They assume the future will simply follow the script they already composed. Think about the person who held an ordinary job for years, was never the loudest presence in any room, and was quietly filed under a very specific frame. Then one day, that person built something real, crossed a threshold that the frame was never designed to contain. That is when the story collapses. When you rose without their help, without their support, without asking for their approval, you did not just succeed. You shattered the narrative they had been comfortable believing for years, and that kind of shock forces them to face a truth they were not prepared to confront. They misjudged you, not slightly, completely. So their minds begin defending the ego. Some will rewrite history and suddenly claim they always believed in you. Funny how that memory only appears after the victory ceremony. Others will minimize the achievement. A few will search for flaws in your process, anything to protect the original story from fully falling apart. But the real issue is not your success. The real issue is that your victory exposed the fact that the version of you they carried in their minds was completely, irreversibly wrong. And when a mental story collapses that completely, it does not disappear quietly. It lingers, because every time they see where you are standing now, it reminds them of the box they built too small. Number 2, your independence exposed their hidden dependence. There is something deeply unsettling about watching someone succeed without the things most people have quietly decided are necessary for success. The right connections, the right network, the right doors opened by the right people. Many people have organized their entire approach to life around the belief that without these things, real progress is nearly impossible. So they wait. They wait for the right opportunity to be handed to them. They wait for approval before they move. They wait for conditions that will never be perfect and for doors that may never open on their own. Then someone like you quietly removes every justification for the waiting. You moved without the circle, without the constant reassurance, without anyone opening the door. You made decisions alone, faced setbacks alone, absorbed losses alone, and kept moving even when no one was watching. And when that kind of independence produces visible results, it does not just inspire, it exposes. It holds up a mirror to everyone who has been telling themselves a story about why they cannot move yet. Your journey reveals, without saying a word, that the waiting was never really about the conditions. It was about fear. And seeing proof that the conditions are not what determine the outcome is a realization that cuts very deep. Your success does not just challenge the belief that you needed help. It challenges the entire framework they have been using to explain their own inaction. And that is a challenge most people resist with everything they have, because dismantling it means facing a silence they have been running from for a very long time. Number 3. Your silence during the struggle made your win impossible to dismiss. When people announce their ambitions loudly, when they broadcast every milestone and every effort, the audience feels involved. They track the journey, they can contextualize the result. They have a narrative to hold on to, that kind of visible. Narrated success is easy to process. But when someone moves in silence, the victory arrives without warning, fully formed, undeniable. And because there was no running commentary, no vulnerable moments shared in real time, the mind cannot easily minimize it. There is nothing to point to, no behind-the-scenes context to use against the outcome. It simply happened. Without permission, and without anyone being given the chance to prepare a response. That kind of quiet arrival carries a weight that public declarations almost never achieve. The silence itself becomes proof. Proof that the work was never about attention. Proof that something real was happening underneath the surface, while everyone around you was busy watching everything else. Number 4. Your rise forced a calculation they never wanted to make. Comparison is a quiet, dangerous emotion. Most people believe they are rooting for others genuinely, and in many cases they are, as long as the person they are supporting remains slightly below them. The human ego is comfortable with the success of people it can still measure itself favorably against. It can celebrate a colleague earning a modest promotion. The gap remains manageable. The social order holds. But the moment someone from the same starting point, someone with no obvious advantages, clears a threshold the observer has not yet reached, the emotional math changes without warning. Admiration competes with something sharper. The mind begins doing calculations it never planned to run. When did they pass me? What did they see that I missed? How did this happen while I was standing still? Sometimes the answers are simple but brutal. While others were talking, you were working. While others were analyzing options, you were choosing one and committing. While others were waiting for the perfect moment, you were moving in an imperfect one. And when the result of that difference becomes visible, some people respond with tight congratulations. Some suddenly remember they always believed in you. And some become very quiet in a way that says everything they are choosing not to say. Like someone who just realized the chessboard changed while they were looking somewhere else. If you feel that this work has poured into your life and you want to pour something back, there is a link in the description below and pinned in the first comment where you can support this channel by buying a coffee. It does not have to be much. It is the heart behind it that matters. Your generosity seeds your own harvest. When you give into the work that speaks life into you, the universe takes notice. So if you feel led, go to that link. Now, every offering is seen and honored. Now, let us keep going. Number 5. Your discipline exposed a gap they prefer not to measure. Every result built through quiet, sustained discipline is also a record. It is an account of thousands of days in which a choice was made. A choice to do the difficult thing instead of the easier one. A choice to return to the work instead of step away. A choice to stay uncomfortable because the alternative was remaining exactly where you were. When that record becomes visible in the form of a result, it creates an implicit comparison for everyone who shared the same hours you had but made different choices. Not because you were more talented, not because you had advantages they lacked, but because on the days when the easier option was available, you consistently chose the harder one. That comparison does not arrive loudly. It arrives quietly in the private moments, when someone looks at where you are and calculates the distance between your position and theirs, and realizes the distance is made almost entirely of choices. Some people respond with inspiration. They decide to change. But many people find it easier to reach for a reason why the comparison does not apply. Because accepting it in full means accepting responsibility for every day they chose differently. And that is a weight not everyone is willing to carry. Number 6. Your solitude proved that the crowd was never the source. Most people move through life inside systems of mutual validation. They draw confidence from the agreement of others. They take action when the group signals that the action is acceptable. They form their sense of what is possible largely from what the people closest to them believe is possible. But the cost of that wiring is subtle and cumulative. When the circle around you carries small beliefs, those beliefs slowly set the boundary on what you allow yourself to attempt. When the people closest to you have never seen someone like you do the thing you want to do, their doubt becomes a ceiling you can almost feel pressing down. You chose something different. Whether by circumstance or by design, you built in a space where the external signal was quiet. No one to validate the plan, no one to confirm it was wise, no crowd to follow, and no consensus to shelter behind. Just you and the work and the decision you made every day to continue, without anyone telling you that it was worth continuing, and that kind of solitude produces a very specific quality of result. It produces something that cannot be explained away, because everyone who might have claimed credit for it was absent when it was being built. Your victory carries the weight it does precisely because the crowd was nowhere to be found when the weight was being lifted. Number 7. Your confidence cannot be undermined because it was not given to you. There is a kind of confidence that comes from external sources, from applause, from titles, from the validation of people whose opinion carries social weight. This confidence is real while it lasts. But it is fragile in a very specific way. It depends on the continued supply of the thing that created it. Remove the applause and the confidence shakes. Withdraw the validation and doubt moves in immediately. That is not the confidence you carry. What you built through years of moving alone, deciding alone, failing alone, and continuing alone is architecturally different. Your confidence was not handed to you. It was not assigned by a title or confirmed by a certificate. It was grown in the exact conditions that usually break people. In the silence where no one was clapping. In the seasons where the progress was invisible and the doubt was loud. In the moments where you chose to keep moving despite having every reasonable justification for stopping. That kind of confidence cannot be shaken by withdrawal, because it was never built on supply. It cannot be undermined by someone removing their approval, because their approval was never part of the foundation. And this is what makes people around you uncomfortable, in a way they cannot fully articulate. They are used to confidence as something that can be managed, something that rises when they compliment you, and falls when they criticize you. But yours does not respond that way. It simply exists, steady, quiet, rooted in something they were not present for and cannot access. Power that cannot be influenced is power that cannot be controlled. And people who are accustomed to having influence over the emotional states of others do not know what to do with someone who has simply moved beyond that reach. Number 8. Your rise rewrote the social map they believed was permanent. People love the comfort of a fixed order. They like knowing where they stand. They like knowing, with reasonable certainty, who is above them, who is below them, and who can be counted on to remain in place. This invisible map assembles itself through years of observation and quiet consensus. And once it is established, it provides a powerful sense of orientation. You knew where you fit. They knew where they fit. The positions were stable. Your rise changed the map. When you succeeded alone without the support, the network, or the permission of others, you made the entire structure fluid in a way it was never supposed to be. Positions that seemed untouchable became uncertain. People who organized their sense of security around the assumption that you would remain below them found their footing unstable. Every threshold you crossed that they assumed required things you did not have was another piece of evidence that the map had been wrong. And a map that was wrong about you might be wrong about other things too, including the positions they believe are safely theirs. That is the part they are not saying out loud. The realization that does not arrive as a single moment of clarity, but as a slow accumulating discomfort that has nowhere clean to land. Your movement proved that the order was never as fixed as it appeared, that status is not permanent, that the future does not simply follow the script, the present writes for it. And for people who organized their safety around the belief that the map was reliable, that proof is quietly devastating. Number 9, the most brutal truth. You did not need them. Every reason above leads here. The most unsettling reality, the one that sits beneath all the others and gives them their specific weight, is simply this. You did not need them, not their approval, not their help, not their guidance, not their network, not their belief in you, not their timing, or their permission, or their recognition. When people categorize you and rank you and build expectations around you, they are also, whether consciously or not, inserting themselves into your narrative. Their judgments feel like forces shaping your outcome. Their presence in your story feels essential to them, but you built the outcome without them. And by doing so, you rendered them irrelevant to something they had assumed they were a part of. That realization does not arrive loudly. It arrives in the quiet, persistent weight of watching someone they thought needed them rise consistently, visibly, and completely on their own terms. Your independence highlights every assumption they held about their own necessity in your life. It forces them to confront the reality that while they were busy believing they were essential to your story, you were simply writing it without them. And that is why your victory does not just sit comfortably in the world. For some people watching from the margins of your journey, it is eating them alive. Not because you won, because you won without them. And nothing exposes the fragility of an ego more directly than discovering it was never required. When you trace the path you have walked, the victories you earned without applause, the obstacles you crossed without support, the mornings you chose the work over everything that was easier, something becomes clear. Your story is not simply a story of achievement. It is a revelation. Every step you took alone sent ripples through the world around you. People who had quietly filed away their expectations of you were forced to reopen the file. People who organized their sense of security around a predictable order were forced to recalculate. People who confused patience with paralysis were forced, in your presence, to know the difference. Your independence proved that success does not require a committee. That solitude can be a strength rather than a disadvantage. That discipline is not a gift given to a few, but a choice available to anyone willing to pay its price consistently. That the box other people build for you has no ceiling unless you decide to honor it. The people watching may feel unsettled. They may minimize what you did, quietly distance themselves, or reach for explanations that protect the story they preferred. Let them. None of that changes what you built. None of that reaches into what you know about how it was built, because you were there in the silence. You were there on the mornings when no one was watching. You were there in the seasons when the progress was invisible, and the doubt was loud, and you chose the work anyway. You know what it cost. You know what it required, and nothing anyone says or fails to say can revise that record. Your victory is not just a milestone. It is a mirror held up to everyone who shared your starting point and made different choices, not to shame them, but to show them what was always possible. What the silence of discipline, the courage of independence, and the stubborn refusal to wait for permission can produce in a human life. You did not just win. You won on your own terms, untethered. Self-sufficient, without permission, without applause, without anyone's approval as a prerequisite. And in doing so, you left a mark that no one who witnessed it will easily forget. The only permission that was ever required was yours, and you gave it to yourself. If this message hit something real in you, do not let it pass without leaving a mark of your own. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the kind of insight that cuts past the surface and reaches the thing most people are afraid to look at directly. Like this video if it reached you where you needed to be reached. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Tell me about the season you built in silence. Tell me about the moment the result appeared and the room went quiet. Your story belongs in this space. Share this video with someone who is in the middle of building alone right now. Someone who needs to hear that the silence is not emptiness but preparation. Let us build something real here. A space where the people who moved without permission, who built without applause, who refused to stay inside the box, are seen fully and without apology. God bless you.